Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 92 of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I just got back from a wonderful summer break. We ended up going to Banff and Jasper in Canada. We did a road trip. We took Munch with us. And if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen all my vacation footage. Before that, I just wrapped up my virtual course for teachers, which was called Teaching Yoga to Beginners, right before I went on the break. It brought me so much joy to meet some of you online, to be in that learning environment, to see your sincerity and dedication to really doing better as yoga teachers. And now, after the course is over, I see some of your emails and you sharing how you've applied what you have learned and your success stories and the clarity it's bringing you. And it warms my heart to see the impact that you are creating. So just wanted to pause on and acknowledge your sincerity, your thoughtfulness, even the fact that so many of you come back week after week to listen to this podcast. It's a sign of just how much this means to you. So just wanted to acknowledge that before we start today's conversation. On the show today, I'm doing a quick shorty episode about some of the questions that come up in my monthly mentorship community, which is the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club. I know a lot of you are new to the show. This is a virtual community. We meet once a month and the meeting lasts about 90 minutes and you can ask your questions. You can bring up things you're stuck with in your yoga journey. You can ask for insight into certain topics, but essentially yoga teachers meet there once a month for clarity, guidance, insight, inspiration, and some humor as well. And as I'm recording this, the next meeting is on July 29th, which is the last Friday of July. So if this is something that you want to explore, then just head to letstalk.yoga and you can find all the details of the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club on there. You can get started for as little as $16 a month. And I've tried to make it really affordable. And you have replay access. You don't just get replay access to the month that you signed up, but you also get replay access to the months that have passed. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out at letstalk.yoga. On the show today, I want to talk about where or how to draw the line between being a yoga teacher and a yoga student. So let's get to it.
Hi, my name is Arundhati and you're listening to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I'm an ex-Bollywood dancer turned yoga and wellness educator. I've built a 6-figure business as an immigrant, woman of color yoga teacher with no business background, no handstands, pure instinct, and the free information found on Google. If you love doing yoga and you dream of teaching it someday, this podcast is for you. We go over everything from doing and teaching yoga to scaling a small business, living a modern yoga lifestyle, and so much more. You'll find interesting, fun, raw conversations along with some tips, tricks, strategies, and insights in this podcast. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in.
When I was very new to teaching yoga, I let myself be completely consumed by the role of being a yoga teacher. So much so that I lost sight of the student within me. This meant that I ended up neglecting my asana practice a lot. I did practice non-asana aspects of yoga, especially elements of philosophy and lifestyle, but I did end up neglecting asana and scriptural study, including time with, teachers and masters. And while the hustle served me in my early days, it also hurt me. Okay. You already know I run 2 studios, the yoga studio, the dance studio. And being an immigrant and trying to really find my footing, I ended up working and being more of a yoga teacher and less of a yoga student for a very long time. Okay. And it slowed me down in developing a deeper, richer understanding of many aspects of yoga. And when I look back, I think I was also blinded by my desire, ambition, and even my service mindset to the local community, because what I noticed was the local community was for so long didn't have an opportunity to practice yoga in this way that I just went all out. Okay, both on the dance front and on the yoga front. And I hit many periods of burnout repeatedly because I used to work 7 days a week. Back then, I didn't have teachers at the studio. I never took breaks because I always showed up to do action or to serve. So it's only when I kept hitting burnout repeatedly that I really started to ask myself, what am I doing? Why am I doing it this way? And reassessed how I was approaching it. The reason I bring this story up is because I want to talk to you about this overlooked aspect in our lives, okay, as yoga teachers. We have to understand how and where to draw the line between being a yoga teacher and being a dedicated, sincere, lifelong student of yoga. Because let's be honest, these two paths are often intertwined and we end up wanting to do justice on both sides. But the truth is, it can be tricky to navigate because a lot of us navigate teaching yoga on our own. And not to mention the fact that we constantly get bombarded by messaging from social media and other platforms. Okay. Now, early on, like traditional yoga, the teacher was always a part of your journey. Okay. But nowadays, because we go about and try to do this by ourselves mostly, we end up learning for a short period with some teachers, and then we end up jumping to things that are appealing online. We don't necessarily learn yoga in a sequential way or even in a clear way. Okay. And this can lead to confusion. We also get distracted by people personalities and mistake charm and people's personalities and fancy marketing to be knowledge itself. So I wanted to sit down and have a quick conversation with you about how to really recognize these two roles, okay, and how to really just navigate being a yoga student as well as being a yoga teacher so you can be in this for the long haul. Okay, so get your pen and paper out. I've compiled a list of 7 things for you to reflect on. And if you've been in my trainings or mentorship communities, you've heard me say this before. In popular yoga, sometimes we end up thinking too much with our heart and too much with our head. But the key is to strike the right balance and to become more engaged, reflective yoga teachers. So my sincere hope is that these 7 pointers will help you reflect and will help you become a more engaged and reflective yoga teacher. Okay, so let's begin. Point number 1, strengthen the realization. Point number 1, strengthen the realization. It all starts with you recognizing that you need to segregate these two roles, the role of a teacher and the role of a student. Most often we know this at the back of our minds, but we don't really bring it into action in our lives. So start by constantly reminding yourself to recognize that when do you put on the teacher's hat and when do you step into the student's role. I would go as far as to say that the studentship hat should be on for the most part. Occasionally, depending on how much and what aspects of yoga you teach, you step into the role of a guide, a teacher, or a mentor. But once that is done, you take that teacher hat off and you go back to being a practicing student for life. I use the word practicing student because we have many people who have studied yoga in the past who still call themselves yoga teachers but don't really have an active practice of any form. So make it a point to recognize when do you embody the role of a student and when do you embody the role of a teacher. When you're not teaching, step out of that identity and go back to being a student. So point number 1 was about strengthening the realization that these two roles exist and that you step in and out of them. Point number 2, and honestly, probably my most favorite one, is cultivate reverence. Point number 2, cultivate reverence. To me, this is the core of living your yoga. You have to cultivate or develop deep reverence for all aspects of yoga. Notice how I'm saying all aspects of the practice, not just a few that you relate to, you understand, or you find appealing or sellable to your yoga market. You have to have reverence for aspects that you don't have capacity to understand yet. That is in your future. You have to develop deep, continuous reverence for the teachings of yoga and for the teachers of this lineage. Without this, you can't walk this path successfully. If you are learning to cultivate reverence, okay, it helps if you have a teacher who can demonstrate this to you in action rather than words. Okay, and it is something that has to come from within and something that you can recognize in your yoga teachers. And something I mentioned in trainings before is this reverence is for you alone. Your reverence does not need to be on display. It doesn't need to be a social media post. It doesn't need to be spoken about. It is something for you within. It is a silent practice. It is a personal, deep spiritual practice. Okay. And sometimes I know we are under pressure modern yoga teachers to show our sincerity outwardly. Okay. There is no need to do so. If you feel it and you operate from that point, that's enough. So point number 2 is cultivate reverence. Okay. That is very, very, very important. And this will keep you on this path in the long haul. Point number 3, recognize the role of time and your personal ability to assimilate the teachings. Point number 3, recognize the role of time and your personal ability to assimilate teachings. Now, I've mentioned many times before on the podcast with so many guests and so many conversations that we try to speed learn our way through popular yoga. I often joke with students, reminding them that there's no expiration date for any of these teachings or practices, that this knowledge is infinite and you have a lifetime to learn. So once you have been exposed to something, okay, when I say exposed to something, I'm talking about a new learning, you need to make time, you need to create space where you can pause and reflect. Okay, give yourself the time to really absorb and assimilate and then apply what you have learned time and time and time again. Okay, learn from the teachings. Okay, we need to stop learning so we can teach it to others. So often we enter trainings and conversations so we can learn something and right away teach it to somebody else. There is that gap of where we have to account for time and assimilation. Okay, so what am I saying? I'm saying learn for the sake of learning itself. Okay, and recognize that the role of time is so crucial in your journey. There is no rush. There is no expiration date. And remember this very important aspect that certain parts of yoga you will end up learning really quickly and they require less time. Other parts of yoga, the contemplative, the reflective parts of yoga, you will have to spend more time on. Okay. For example, something in asana you can learn right away and you can also probably teach it right away depending on your skill set. Whereas something in pranayama or philosophy or scriptures, that will take much longer time to reflect and assimilate. Okay. And this is just a high level example. But point number 3 is recognize the role of time and your own individual ability to assimilate the teachings of yoga. Point number 4, embrace the hierarchy of teachers and students. If you read ancient scriptures, there is talk about different levels of teachers in Indian spirituality, not just in yoga. Okay? It extends beyond yoga in the scriptures. And it also recognizes that there are different capacities of students, different levels of students. Now, I briefly mentioned this in a conversation with Kaya almost one year ago, if I'm getting my timelines right. But I'll link that for you in the show notes. But this was done so that teachers could best serve the student and help them learn in a way that was easiest for them to grow spiritually. Okay, it was not about just taking more number of students and packing them into a room and teaching them a general format, which is what happens in modern yoga or modern education in general. But it was really about finding out how the student learns and the teachers then offering them different tools, different techniques, different ways of learning to help serve them the best. Okay. Now, it really is lost in popular yoga. But what I'm trying to say is recognize that you will need different teachers at different points in your journey. Okay. Sometimes you will find a teacher and you can study with them for a lifetime. It really depends on the teacher and it depends on you. But recognize that you have strengths and weaknesses as a student. Okay. And keep doing the work. Your strengths will keep getting stronger, but work on areas of improvement. And remember that it is okay to not know everything. It is okay to not understand everything right away. It takes time. But if you are teaching something to others, okay, just make sure you teach from a point of clarity and not confusion and not any peer pressure or the need to appear a certain way. Okay, so point number 4, recognize and embrace the hierarchy of teachers and students, and always work with teachers who are ahead of you in their journey, okay, and who teach the timeless wisdom of yoga. Point number 5, set seasons in your life to be a student and to be a teacher. Now, I'm going to give you an example here. Just like how if you drive, your car cannot travel at the same speed, say 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You have to take breaks, right? So why not apply this in our yoga journey as teachers, right? I highly recommend that you have seasons in your life or seasons in your year or month or however you divide your time where you can indulge in being more a student. And then you have seasons where you work on being a better teacher. So you really get to create space and clarity between the two roles. Often we try to do both at the same time. We get confused. For 2 minutes, we are a teacher. For the next 5 minutes, we're a student. And we just jump back and forth. But think about this, right? Maybe you could try being a student a few months in a year where you either study something deeply, you learn a new course, you develop a new skill, and then you spend some other time in the year being more of a teacher. Okay. But just make sure when you do this, you immerse yourself fully in each role, fully in a student role. And then for those small moments where we teach others, you're fully present in that. Okay. So point number 5, set seasons in your life to be a student or being a teacher. Okay. Now for me personally, I end up teaching a lot of asana at the studio because that's what the community needs here locally. But I make sure I spend a few months in the year in relatively immersive study. Okay. And that is just renewing my commitment to yoga. Point number 6 is who or what are you surrounding yourself with? Okay. It is so easy to get confused by all the mixed yoga messaging out there. I know so many of you come on social media and tell me this. I hear it in the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club. And I keep telling you this, put on blinders. Okay. Put on blinders. Make sure to recognize that not all the sources of what you see in the name of yoga are actually authentic yoga. And you're also, where the algorithms are constantly working and showing us what they think is yoga. I mean, how can an algorithm know what is yoga, right? So just know that yoga really exists beyond the realms of the digital world. So please put on your blinders, follow only teachers and content that is truly authentic, truly uplifting, and brings you clarity and is timeless in nature. If somebody is pulling out a thing that is happening politically or locally or regionally, and then tying all their yoga to that, that's not timeless. Okay. So please make sure that the learnings you get are timeless in nature because yoga is timeless. Yoga wisdom is timeless. Okay. The last point here, point number 7, is choose clarity and contentment over everything else. Okay. Choose clarity and contentment over everything else. Okay. Anything you learn in yoga, whether that's a social media post that you read or a blog or a newsletter, a book, or even listening to a podcast, you should gain more clarity, more contentment, a sense of deep peace within you. If you notice that this is not your experience, then I would question what you are learning in the name of yoga or who you are learning this from. Okay. It's very important that you pause on this one thought. Clarity and contentment over everything else. So it doesn't matter whether you are doing a 500-hour course or you're reading a 30-second post on social media. If that is bringing you deep clarity, wisdom, and a sense of more connectedness with yourself, then it is adding value. If it's just confusing you, it seems trendy, it seems popular, then you might need to filter your feed a little more, if that makes sense. Okay. So those are my top 7 things to keep in mind while segregating the dual roles of being a teacher and a student. I hope you reflect on this. I hope you sit with it. And most importantly, I hope these 7 points, not all 7, some will appeal to you more than others, will serve you deeply. Okay. I want you to spend some time thinking about this and pick one that really resonated with you. Okay. It's almost like I'm giving you podcast homework here, but pick one that really resonated with you. And then head over to Instagram and ping me and tell me why that particular one really hit home for you. I would really love to know. I enjoy listening to your thoughts on these episodes and answering any questions you have. So I hope you do that. Okay. And I want to wrap up with one quick podcast update. I'm currently lining up my next set of guests for the show. And since it's summer here in the US and people are traveling, you may notice that there will be an occasional week or so where I may or may not drop a podcast episode through August. Also, my dad is visiting briefly. and there's a bunch of other things coming up. So I might end up taking a week or so off in between. So just a heads up, if you notice I don't drop an episode, you know why. But anytime you notice that there's no episode, we've got so many already in the past 2 years of this podcast running. There's such rich content, and the guests have shared such deep wisdom that so many of these episodes warrant multiple listens. Okay, so anytime you don't see an episode drop until we wrap up summer here in the US, just go back and listen to one of our older episodes. Okay, I will see a lot of you next week, July 29th, in the Mindful Yoga Teachers Club. Until then, please remember to rate, review this podcast so that this free resource can land into the hands of other yoga teachers who are looking for content like this. And so many of them don't even know content like this exists for free. Your reviews will really help validate what we're doing and will help us last longer offering this podcast. Okay, that's all for today. I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.